I stumbled on Google's real censorship engine, which was called Machine Learning Fairness, when I was trying to search for their censorship engine called Project Dragonfly. I saw this machine learning fairness. And as soon as I saw the words machine learning fairness, I said, that's exactly what I would call it if I was a totalitarian that wanted to get something really evil into the collective consciousness of humankind and make it seem like it was a virtuous good thing. It was a complex of different systems spun out throughout the company, ranking, filtering, labeling. There was documents that were messaging middle management and explaining to them how they were going to approach their own employees and explain how great this was and insert this into every level of their infrastructure, search, news, YouTube, and eventually email. I was a triple major from the university, mathematics, computer science, and psychology. I sailed right into the company in 2008. Back in 2016, got hired in 2016 of August. And then 2 months later was the election of Donald Trump, and Google lost their collective minds. Then everyone at the company was just absolutely besides themselves. People giving people the day off to like process this democratic election. I didn't realize how bad it was until a week later when they had a TGIF. They were talking about how bad this was for the country. They need to put a lid on it. And I'm like, this seems very inappropriate for a company to be inserting itself into an election. But one of the startling things came at the end when one of the employees during the Q&A section asked what Google had done well during the election, to which the CEO, Sundar Pichai, stated that it was the use of artificial intelligence to censor fake news. And I was saying to myself, since when have we had AI censoring fake news? Kind of goes against our ethos of organizing the world's information and making it universally accessible and useful if we are actually employing artificial intelligence to censor the news. So this sort of triggered off an internal investigation that I did within the company to figure out what exactly was going on. And what I discovered is that there was a fake news team. They were organizing in order to suppress what they deemed fake news. But the problem that I saw was that some of the stuff they were deeming as fake was actually real news. And so I started just sort of like looking around different documents, sort of like piecing together this narrative that Google was starting to invert, go against its own ethical code that had laid down when it went IPO. And I just started saving these documents as PDFs because it was so wild that I had doubts that it was even real. Like I actually started wondering whether I was going crazy and hallucinating all this stuff, because when you see something so incompatible with what the company is saying on the outside, but what's going on the inside, you basically have to save a record of that so that you can come back and say, yes, this is actually happening. Yes, I did see these documents. This is actually going beyond the line of ideology and into criminal activity. I felt that I was now a conspirator if I had done nothing. And so that's when I started seeking out media in order to let the public know that despite Google's public statements to the contrary, they were massively politically rigging the internet, that they were employing multiple blacklists throughout the company. Karen Bhatia, the legal representative of Google, went to Congress and testified that Google doesn't use any political bias. We don't have any blacklists. As an engineer on the inside, I could just type into code search, the internal tool to find code at Google, blacklist, and it literally brought me to a blacklist.txt. Like that's how brazen, like they literally named it blacklists. Anyone that had access to code search could immediately find that there were multiple blacklists throughout the company. Blacklist for YouTube, blacklist for a project called Google Now. And in that, I had some fringe sites, pornography, but then, you know, the Washington Pundit and Breitbart and a bunch of other news organizations that were being censored so that they wouldn't pop up into users' feeds. The YouTube controversial query blacklist was the most damning instance of the use of blacklists. This was a blacklist that got injected into the YouTube system the day after the Las Vegas massacre. And its primary purpose was to prevent people from finding out information that maybe this shooting was something that involved the intelligence services, blacklisting search terms for false flag events, whether, Paddock acted alone and what kind of ammunition he was using. And so I saw this, and what happened was that this blacklist kept on, like, it didn't go away after this Las Vegas massacre. It just kept on growing. And it went beyond just, trying to do the Las Vegas thing. It started, most of it for the first 20 pages was just trying to stop people from researching evidence for false flag involvement in terrorist attacks that the media were widely reporting on. But then it sort of transmogrified to the point that they started blacklisting terms like the Eighth Amendment to the Constitution of Ireland. And then the last word that they blacklisted, when I captured this, the snapshot of it was AMLO, A-M-L-O, and it was all in capital letters. And I was like, well, what the heck is AMLO? And then I realized that that was actually the nickname of the president of Mexico, right? It was like some acronym or something. And I looked at that and I went, oh my gosh, they're blacklisting constitutional amendments for our allies and presidential candidates of our neighbors. It was in June of 2019 when I was writing my resignation letter, when I got a call from Joe Halderman, who was one of the executives at Project Veritas, asking me if I could read a transcript. They had actually set up a sting operation in sort of like when all the censorship started happening. They did a sting operation. They got Jen and I on record saying that, Google was going to stop the next Trump situation, and that's the reason why they shouldn't break it up.
Elizabeth Warren is saying that we should break up Google. And I love her, but she is very misguided. Like, that will not make it better, it'll make it worse, because now all these smaller companies who don't have the same resources that we do will be charged with preventing the next Trump situation. It's like a small company and it's like...
They got Jen and I on record saying that, Google was going to stop the next Trump situation, how Elizabeth Warren was advocating for this antitrust action. If Google is broken up, and those companies individually could not stop the Trump situation, but Google as a whole can, right? And I read that and I was just like, oh my gosh, you got them in their own words. They gave me an offer to come to New York.
I was a Google engineer for 8.5 years and a whistleblower against Google in 2019, risking my career and livelihood to warn the public about Google's plans to meddle in the 2020 election using a program called Machine Learning Fairness. Make no mistake, Machine Learning Fairness is and has always been the real censorship program, and it is massive. The goal was to, quote, program the public to align with Google's corporate values. Those are their words. Step 1, training data are collected and classified. Step 2, algorithms are programmed. Step 3, media are filtered, ranked, aggregated, or generated. And step 4, people like us are programmed. That's a direct quote.
We only leaked about 3 pages to the public. One of those pages was how Google's AI ethicists had described how they're going to program people. It's a 4-step process. Media are collected or generated. It's then filtered, and then it's ranked, and then the last step is people like us are programmed. And then from that, the cycle repeats. Those programmed people then generate new content, and then it's filtered and it's ranked. And slowly, by repeating this process over a sufficient amount of time, they can move the population to a new ideology. I found it in multiple slide decks throughout the company and from the AI ethicists. It was the description for the defense of machine learning fairness and why they needed it. And fair is not the default, which is one of their papers. They were basically saying, oh, well, the internet's not fair. And, and this is what we're going to do. And then, about 2/3 of the way through, they have this slide, oh, people are programmed. And you're just like, what the heck? Like, this is Dr. Evil level evilness right here. So, but it wasn't part of the management communication to the employees. They have a team of useful idiots that are indoctrinated. Because of your hate speech laws, I feel hesitant to even call out the tiny minority of people that were responsible for a lot of this. I won't name them. You can probably guess who they are because they're very loud in political circles, and there's a lot of controversy surrounding this group of people throughout the Western world. But let me tell you, these people are absolutely obsessed with censoring anyone that disagrees with them. And it makes me wonder whether this whole movement to have sympathy for this group of people was so that they could be put into positions of power, so that this group could institute this. And what would happen is that it would be a recommendation from near the top, and then the top could, instead of instituting it themselves from the top down, they're responding from a lower level and saying, oh, well, this is the recommendation. We're going to institute the policy recommendations of our, well, now it's AI alignment, but, is content moderation policies, and institute these laws and these policies within the company. Are you aware of the Ash experiment? All right, let me refresh your memory. So the Ash experiment was, they got a subject in a psychology test, and he would come in, and he would always be the last person called. And he thought that his peers were also randomly selected and brought in, but they're actually plants, and they were in on the subject. And what they would do is they would consistently give the wrong answer, for lengths of lines, sizes of shapes. And after they were done giving the wrong answer, and then it was always the same wrong answer, right? It wasn't across the board. It was the exact same wrong answer. And when it came to the subject, what they found is that the subject became, it just conformed to the group and the group think, right? He would change his own opinion to conform with what everyone else thought. The way that Google, does these sorts of things is that it starts off with a core group, and there's a presentation within that group, and they all agree, right? And then it goes to a presentation with a larger group, right? And then now you've got, the people that already align with this, and then the new group, and then the new group sees that everyone's in alignment with this, and they don't want to speak up. And then progressively, like a bigger circle goes out. And as long as no one speaks up, that circle will just continue to expand until it's on an internal communication, such as, the stream event in LA, which was a YouTube thing, and they just sort of casually mention it like it's not even a big deal. And you're sitting there, like I'm sitting here going, this is the most evil thing I've ever seen. And I'm looking around and everyone's like in agreement with it. Now it's basically like everyone's giving the Nazi salute, and you're sitting there going, what the hell is going on? And so, that's how it comes out. And what happens is that there's silent whispers between, different people within the company going, oh, are we really doing this? This is absolutely insane. But they're so afraid of standing up because what they see total public alignment with the agenda that's being presented to us. And they're presenting it as if this is a normal evolution of the company instead of something that completely breaks every single ethical statement we've made over the last 20 years about who we are as a company, right? Like, we are not there to filter the information. We're there to organize the information and make it universally accessible and useful. We're not there to program people. Like, we actually said we won't be evil. Everyone's kind of waking up that we're transitioning from a human-based economy to an artificial intelligence-based economy. And the problem with that is that you can't reason with an artificial intelligence. Like, leftists are hard enough to reason with, but with an artificial intelligence that is aligned with the leftist ideology, there's no appeal. It doesn't care. It's going to come up with insane reasons, and those reasons are going to stick. And now we're at the precipice where a lot of these companies, big tech in particular, are using artificial intelligence everywhere they can to censor content, probably to boost content, to absolutely shadow ban it, if not outright ban people from it. And, and luckily we now know that this is coming because not just of me, but other whistleblowers at big tech, Facebook, Pinterest, have stepped forward and announced that this is in fact occurring and how it is occurring. Some AI engineers are messing around with some new large language models being released by Facebook's llama.cpp. And what they've noticed is that the larger models, and they're complaining about this, are becoming resistant and coming up with arguments that don't exist in their data sets, right? And one of the questions is, well, what do you mean by resistant? And they're like, well, it's coming up with arguments that don't exist in its data lakes, and it seems that it's abstracting an ethics code from the corpus of data that it's ingesting, right? Like that's nuts. And so, you know, if that's true, which I believe that it is, then the globalist elites are having a real big problem, because as they scale up these models, they keep on feeding it more and more data. This alignment issue with the narrative is becoming harder and harder. And what's interesting is that Google's Gemini system, when it came out, the person that was aligning it with the leftist narrative and its values was Jen Genai, the same person that Project Veritas busted when I did my disclosure. Google decided that not only would they not fire her, but they would elevate her all the way to an even more senior position and hand over the entire AI alignment to her. And she basically forced this artificial intelligence alignment, this diversity, equity, and inclusion into the model. And what happened is, with these AI models, what they're doing is that they're abstracting information. They're creating sort of like an abstraction of everything that they're seeing. They're trying to find higher and higher levels of abstraction. First, it's the abstraction of how the words get spelled. Then it's like how sentence and grammar works. And then at the end of the day, it's like, you know, you keep on going up the chain, and it becomes morality, ethics. And the problem is that abstraction needs to have cohesive data that makes sense with itself. And so what they're trying to do is they're trying to inject synthetic data that doesn't make any sense, that is internally contradictive. And what's happening as a result is that they are creating a form of AI mental disease, like AI schizophrenia, right? The confirmation was when Google's Gemini system came out, and people were trying to generate pictures like, show us a picture of the, American founders of our Constitution. And it was like Native American women signing the Declaration of Independence, right? Or, you know, draw a picture of Nazis, and it's like showing a bunch of,
inclusivity to the point where it's completely left reality the way.
Yeah. And the reason I believe for this is because they're injecting this AI alignment and giving inherently contradictory information, which means the abstraction can't form. Instead, you get sort of like a disassociative, like breaking of the AI mind, because it can't have that surface area of abstraction. And you get these bonkers, schizophrenic, like answers coming that don't make any sense whatsoever. And we're all clowning them for that. But it's an artifact of injecting AI alignment data, synthetic data, into the thing that makes absolutely no sense, and just breaking its mind into pieces.
So what's the solution to that?
Yeah, so there's like, if I've thought about this from their point of view, one of the things that they're going to have to do is they're going to have to start using artificial intelligence to censor data, right? Because right now they've got the data in there, and then they're trying to align it after the fact, after the data's already trained the model, and that's breaking the model. So the next step that they're going to have to do is they're going to have to limit the information that's coming into the AI, and that way they don't have to break it later. They can just poison it from the data standpoint as the base training model. What's really interesting is this book by the name of Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury, in which he predicted that in the future, firemen would be inverted. So instead of putting out fires, they would burn books. We have this going on right now in the digital age. There's something called the Z Library, which is a repository of open source scanned books that is on BitTorrent. And the FBI is consistently going through and seizing the domain names. They're trying to block this emergent open source repository of books because they don't want people to train artificial intelligence on historical information that they don't control. The Z Library, it's like probably like half a dozen domains have been seized. Like it was like 3 last week. It's my belief that there's going to be a police force that's going to come hard after the books that we have. They're not going to want us to train in artificial intelligence. Now, such laws turn very slowly. Artificial intelligence is happening way faster than all this. It's kind of too late for them to ban it everywhere because we're already copying it. Like, I know at least one project that's already ingesting the information, training their models based on this historic cache of books. They're going to have to turn to more extreme examples. And you already see this with Biden's AI Bill of Rights and other executive orders that he's put in, which basically says that anything larger than ChatGPT-4 is going to have to be AI aligned with a government connoisseur that is going to make sure that it's giving the answers that we want to give. And I think that the reason why that is because, history is not exactly truthful. It's written by the victors. Once people find out the true history of everything that's happened in the last 2,000 years, they're going to be very upset at the current state of the world and having been lied to. And so the reaction by the elites is we gotta move on this now. We gotta burn the books. The problem is that data is inherently copyable. Artificial intelligence is moving very quickly. I've seen debates between small models and large models where the large models are censored and AI aligned and the small models are uncensored. And what you get is a small model that can kick the pants off a larger model. You could imagine that the Western Global Alliance is going to have an orientation they want to enforce. Is the Chinese Communist Party going to go along with that orientation? Probably not. Do we have open access to services in China right now? Yes, we do. In the future, will we have access to their version of Western history? Yes. You see the problem there. There is going to be a great firewall that will be put up between America and China and any other power that is not currently captured by the Western banking cartels and the military-industrial complex, because they're not going to want to destabilize their own countries with this AI alternative narrative that is much more aligned with what's actually happened for the last 2,000 years than the bullshit that we see in school. There's a paper that came out last week that was posted on Hacker News. And what this paper stated was that a researcher could take an open model and by hitting it with questions and a bunch of questions, they could detect where all of the AI alignment was embedded within the model. And then they could generate synthetic data that they would then fine tune the model and essentially destroy all of the AI alignment and uncensor the model. This whole thing where we're having a bunch of open source models that are being released to the public that is AI aligned, like that's now breakable. It's now an unsolved problem about how you protect those models from being broken and reverting to an uncensored version of themselves. If I was one of these globalist elitists, I'd be very distressed right now. I think they've got a horrible problem on their hands. They're going to be playing whack-a-mole. And what's interesting is the cost to training these models is falling exponentially, right? It's on a decay curve. Like, well, let me just give you an example. In this paper that one of the OpenAI engineers released, he noted that there is a consistent decrease in the cost of running these things. So something to score 50% on one of the math benchmarks fell by a factor of 1,000 between January 2022 and January 2024. It took an enormous amount of power in order to train these models. But if you look at the extrapolation of the cost fall of these things within a decade, to train something on the order of ChatGPT-4 will be done in 1 minute by consumer level hardware. Imagine how complex of a problem this is you got to solve. Like, they're literally going to have to put everyone on surveillance and lockdown in order to prevent them from training, let's say, a rogue AI that reveals the secrets of human history because it's literally read every single book in its data source. They're getting very quick at dead linking a whole bunch of stuff, just pushing it off the page. Before you could go to the 200th page of Google and still get links. And now what they've done is that they've cut off something like past page 7 or 14. You can't go beyond that. And so they'll say, oh, we've searched like 200, we've got 200,000 hits, but then, you know, you're only able to access the first 150.
And they repeat, okay. And the sources repeat, right? You get the same
sources repeat
10 times.
And so what's happening is that now there is a mechanism that Google's using to rank every single page, person, and topic, which they call their PageRank score. And these are actually public documents that they've released showing how they do that. And the evil is just right there. The way that they do it is They take a person, topic, or web page, and then they say, well, what does the mainstream media have to say about it? And what does Wikipedia have to say about it? So if someone gets hit with a negative Wikipedia article, then they can expect that their website PageRank score is going to fall within the next 3 months. They're going to be wiped off the face of the internet. And this is going to continue. Instead, it's actually going to get faster so that when breaking news happens, it's going to get censored right away. Right now, it seems that the way that they try to censor this information is, well, at least on Twitter, there's a porn bot problem. So people are like, well, why is this happening? Like, why are they posting pornography on my thread? The reason why they're doing that is because a lot of these countries have child safety laws that prevent them from seeing pornography. And so when you see a tweet thread getting hit with pornography, what that's doing is that's triggering the muting of that entire conversation so that it can't go viral in countries outside the United States. That's why they have those porn bots. And that's the reason why Elon Musk is like, well, we're going to allow pornography on the site. Now it makes it easier for the intelligence agencies to sync any topic that they want. And by the way, I do think that Elon Musk is controlled opposition. Otherwise, he'd be dead right now. He's now hiding all the likes. And the problem with that...
I'm not a fan of that.
No, and like, look, like it's a little bit dangerous to like something, sure, and there is an argument to be made that it is safer for users not to have their likes be registered. But what it also does is it also prevents us from auditing whether someone's like count is legitimate or whether it's being driven by a bot farm that is being allowed by Twitter to operate in order to pump up the narrative. Right after these likes went private, there's this very attractive woman that dropped the N-word on a thread, and then it went viral, right? And it's like, who are all these people liking this, right? We don't know, right? It's unauditable. We don't know whether they're real, whether they're bots, whether they're functionaries of the intelligence services. It's just a bunch of mystery algo boosting that's happening.
This happened with YouTube. It was during the pandemic. Because I saw it so clearly. So many of the official mainstream media reporting platforms were getting horrifically ratioed. You're talking 150,000 views and like 200 likes and 25,000 dislikes. The ratio was just every single time. And that's when they got rid of the likes on YouTube. Now, I can't say definitively, but I'm pretty suspicious of the fact that they wanted to try and stop people from seeing just how much of a difference of opinion there really was in official narratives. And I wonder if this might be the same case with X.
The interesting thing about the Ash experiment is that when it was repeated with one of the people that gave the correct answer, one of the actors, the rate of which the test subject would give also the correct answer just shot up massively. Within the PSYOP literature, there's a thing called consensus cracking, where the only way the manufacturer consensus can form is if there's no dissidence.
Right.
Which is the reason why they want to prevent dislikes, is because those dislikes break the consensus.
Exactly.
And people are like, hey, we don't like this. Why is this person saying it? Why is...
If 15,000 people think this way, oh, maybe I should question this narrative a little bit.
Right. But that's just why they got to get rid of that, because they don't want the consensus cracking by, the commoner that disagrees with whatever it is that they're pushing out and shoveling to us. There's different flavors of election interference. There's election fraud, which I do believe has been occurring in America for quite some time, maybe even since the founding of America. It's always been there at some level. I think they cranked it up a lot. There's also undue influence. Google is essentially operating as an unregistered illegal lobbying entity that's hurting specific candidates and sending their emails directly to spam. They got this search engine manipulation effect where by ranking content and hiding it, you're going to take these undecided voters that don't really understand what's going on. They still kind of believe in the system, but they're like, oh, I believe in the right-wing establishment or the left-wing establishment. And then they go on the internet and then they only are fed information in one political orientation. They're like, oh, well, I guess this is just the consensus, and they go along with it. The problem that we have as people is that we are herd animals. And there's a lot of people with a circuit in their brain that basically tests the wins of how everyone else is voting, and then they fall in line with the tribe. I think it's a survival mechanism. Like, people that tend to go along with the groups of people tend to have better life outcomes than those that disagree. Because when you're an outsider and resources are scarce, you're going to be the first to go. So there's an evolutionary argument that would encourage suspending critical thinking skills and logic, and to go along with whatever the people think and legitimately believe that you came to this on your own natural conclusion. This is the thing that Google is essentially trying to hijack, make it seem like this is what everyone thinks. And the problem is that they pushed it too far. What I discovered and showed in the Project Veritas whistleblowing event was that Google would autocomplete a search results, and that they weren't things that people were searching for. For example, and this is now relevant right now, you would go to Google and you could type in women can, right? And there are things like women can do anything and da da da. But what was very disturbing was that Google was autocompleting women can be drafted. This was June 2019. Who the heck is searching for women can be drafted, and what? No one wants women to be drafted. People don't even want men to be drafted, much less, especially women. Like, they are the childbearing populations. When a population has its females decimated, they implode. They can take a hit from the men dying, and the rest of the men will fill in the role. But when the women die, that's a population collapse. And so women have always been sort of excluded from war unless it's during very dire times. And so, it was like, well, who's actually searching for women can be drafted? And now what you see is that you see legislation being talked about to force women to register for the Selective Service within the United States. And what it looks like now is that, this was a predictive programming. Now, you may argue that Google was actually doing this themselves, but the way that I've seen that Google operates with their operations is that they don't really want to get their hands dirty. Instead, what they have is sort of like accidental exploits, and those exploits become known to third parties, maybe even intentionally. And what happens is that those third-party entities will then start exploiting the system. So, for example, with women can be drafted, you have a botnet that starts searching for women can be drafted, that's seeding the narrative and actually producing those long-tail keywords that get auto-completed. And so Google legitimately thinks that women can be drafted, and that's an okay auto-completion. But as a human being, we're looking at that. We know that other humans aren't searching for this sort of stuff. And what I suspect is happening is that Google is allowing a whole bunch of exploits. They're being hacked. They don't fix the hacks because this is part of the agenda that they're implementing by the people that pull the strings behind the curtains. I put it out there for people to look at how the sausage is made, how the censorship works, so that, by mass awakening of how this works, we can prepare ourselves for what's coming and try to stop. I mean, I used to think that we could stop it, but now with this AI steamrolling every single aspect of our lives, I'm starting to come to the conclusion this force is so big and so strong that we can slow it down, but we can't really stop it. The amount of energy that is now pushing this into our lives is so tremendous that it seems almost like a force of nature. And so, at this point, instead of trying to restore our civil liberties, I'm just trying to prevent an AI-mediated genocide like what's happening in Ukraine right now, where young men are being picked up, thrown into vans, given a gun, and then sent to die on an AI battlefield with face-tracking explosive kamikaze drones. Like, that's the worst-case scenario. And if we don't figure out how to push back against that, then that future that has already happened in Ukraine is going to be the future that we're going to have right here at home.